Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Hot summer here in Arizona. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. We do read, answer, reply to comments, because we got nothing better to do, I guess, some days. Go visit our website, www.legendofsuperstitionmountains.com. We got a new t-shirt vendor and stuff. And always remember, important to remember, the Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, the 20th anniversary, coming up this October 25th, 26th, 27th, 2024. So let's get to this week. There was a story I was going to do, and then I changed out, and I've talked about that. And then there was a story that came to mind, and it was something more recent, had been told to me. But I was like, well, is this something I say for that October time of year? Well, it's not really that. It's kind of a mystery. It's mysterious. And I kind of went back and forth, and then I kind of ran it through my head a couple times and thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. And then I decided that's not the story I was going to do. So I started to come up with another story. I had 3 or 4 sitting there. And then for some reason, I went back to that story again. So we're going to tell that story, the one that I didn't think would work, and then I thought maybe I'll do it in October, and then I'll not, because confusion is probably my middle name. And confusing myself on what I'm going to do week to week is pretty apparent. But I thought it just, if it sticks with you, it's in your craw and you can't get it out, you got to get it out to get it out. So here's how it goes. This is an individual I wouldn't say is necessarily a Dutch hunter. He's kind of mixed into the Dutch hunting community. There's a number of people like that I don't know if we'd call them full-blown Dutch hunters, but they're very interested in superstitions. They spend a significant amount of time, and they know actually a lot more about the history than a lot of just basic Dutch hunters. And I'd corresponded through email and eventually some messages with this person. And he was very interested in a number of sites and stuff and material that was publicly available. And it was easier sometimes for me to send him a file or something about something in particular. And what he was doing at times was capturing GPS coordinates of certain things he found, or the sites I hadn't been to for a while and I didn't have a necessarily pinpointing GPS, and he'd share the information. So it was kind of a share thing. It wasn't about pictures of how's your trip, here's a list of those spots I was in, and this is, certain things. Now he was very interested in Fish Creek. It was more the upper Fish Creek area, not the area we did a lot of filming in, that most people are familiar with our stuff with. And he had planned to make a trip, and he was talking to me about it. I told him it was more reasonable to go in through Lost Dutchman, Lost Dutch Canyon, through Tortilla, and go down towards the bridge than the other way, because the other way would be far more difficult. I'd never went from north to south through that section, but I've been from south to north, and it's a tough one. Give yourself plenty extra time. So we talked about it a little, and I said it's going to be difficult because there's no cell phone coverage down at Fish Creek Bridge generally. So since you're not really going to have cell reception, it could be intermittent and stuff. You're going to have to plan for your pickup. You're going to have to give yourself extra time and all that. And we talked it out. What he wanted was, there's been a number of government mineralogical surveys, and there are general ones and there's very specific ones, and I have a lot of files, a lot of material on these different surveys and geological reports and so forth in different areas. And I had one for that general area he was talking about, and it listed a number of prospects and different things, but also probably about 20 or 30 caves in there. There probably was more than that, but there were caves that were mentioned that were inaccessible and this and that. and it had diagrams that showed you where the caves approximately were in the canyons. A lot of good information. So he wanted to know, hey, do you mind sharing that? And I said, no, I don't got a problem. It's a public thing. It's just difficult to find that specific one. I ran into it. And I said, but I'll copy it off. I'll make a copy. And if you want, come by and I'll just give you that. It'd be easier to do that or meet me somewhere. So he came by here, and it was just a brief stop. We'd met at the Rendevous before, but it was just a pull-up stop, hand that off, okay. But when he was here, he kind of looked in, and a lot of my gear is in the garage, hung out and stuff. And at that point, I had some stuff I was reorganizing. It was spring. We'd finished the winter and spring kind of hikes and stuff. And I was kind of looking through the accumulation of gear, older gear and newer gear. And I was trying to kind of get stuff organized because coming fall, winter the next year, I would be ready to go again. And we talked for a little bit. And then he said, I want to mention something to you. He'd just been out in the mountains. And he said it had been about 3 or 4 weeks before. And he said, I was out by Blacktop, and he had an interest in Blacktop and Palomino and stuff. And he said he'd been out there, and he was doing a number of hikes, kind of working out the GPS line and how long it took the hikes. And I know Jack Carlson's book covers that, but he wanted to kind of know, so for future trips, about how long the trails and so forth. I don't know if he went down Bull Pass. I don't know how far deep from there he went. I knew he went out by Blacktop. But he said he was coming back through Brush Corral, and he said I was going up the hill. And he says, when you get to the top of the hill there, coming out, not Black Mesa, but the regular route a lot of people take down into Brush Corral. He said there's that area where you can sit. There's a lot of stones or boulders and stuff. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that. I've sat there. Generally going in, I've sat there and waited for people. When I went out on the trail, they've been running late, so I'll just go down the trail for a way, and that's a point I'll wait at before I go down into Brush Corral. And at the same time, coming out, that's always a good spot. There's the bushes and some small trees and stuff there. There's a couple shade spots. So I said, yeah, I'm really familiar with that. And yeah, coming out, it's up on your left there, and it's kind of, there's a little bit of a clear area. And people will gather there. I've had a couple stories from people I've ran into and stories I've told where I've been in that general area. He said, well, I came up into there, and I got up and figured I was going to take a break before I finished hiking out to First Water. And he said, I sat down, and there was a guy standing there. And he said, I kind of noticed him, but then I realized he was standing so still. It was almost like you didn't notice him. And he said, nothing triggered me. I figured he was doing the same thing I was. I didn't notice him on the trail ahead of me. So it was kind of odd, but I realized he was there. I don't know how long he'd been there. And he's standing there. He said he was in like a denim shirt, had the sleeves rolled up, pair of faded Levi's. He said it looked like hiking boots, work boots of some sort, tan, brown. And he said he had a backpack on, tan, weathered backpack. And very short hair. He said he had almost like a flat top. He said he's probably in his late 30s, early 40s. He said he was kind of looking at him, and he realized the guy stood there for a long time. And the guy just kind of was turning his head, and he thought maybe he's just looking around at stuff. And then finally, when he got ready to go, because he realized the guy had been there before him, and he'd been standing the whole time and hadn't moved, he said, are you okay? And the guy said, I'm not quite sure where I'm at. And he said it's very polite, had a little growth of beard, but he said he seemed kind of normal. He said, told him where he was. He said, that was Brush Corral. I don't know which way you came from. This is the way out to First Water, out by First Water Ranch and First Water Trailhead. If you keep going, it's not that far. You'll be there within the next 30, 40 minutes probably. And the guy kind of nodded and looked at him kind of like distant or confused. And he said, are you okay? And he said, I'm not sure. And he thought, well, I wonder if this guy has like heat stroke or heat exhaustion, which is, that can be a sign of it where someone just can't kind of get a grip. So he was like, oh, well, and it was warm out, he said, but he said it was still not too late in the day. He was, well, something's not right. So he's talking to the gentleman, and he said, well, why don't we walk out together? There should be a ranger or someone there. And maybe we can kind of, by that point, no, you got water? And the guy said, yeah, he said he had a canteen on his hip. And the guy actually, when he mentioned it, took a sip of water and said, no, I feel fine. I'm not quite sure where I'm at. I don't remember this. And he said the guy seemed totally puzzled. So as they were waiting and they started to walk, another couple came up from Brush Corral Basin. I guess from talking later, he said they did the Black Mesa loop through Garden Valley, Black Mesa, Brush Corral, and back out. And they came up and they noticed, because the guy was a little in front of him, well, not quite walking with him. He wasn't conversing much. And they looked and said, are you okay? Are you together? And the guy, said, no, we're not together. He was over here, and he kind of like was trying to get the guy to talk to them, and the guy was same with them. Was kind of, I'm just not sure. He says, I'm not quite sure. And they were all kind of like, oh, there's a problem. Now this couple was a man and a woman, married couple, possibly, who knows? But they were in their 50s or 60s, and they kind of were a little concerned too. And they were like, is this medical? Is there something going on here we don't understand? So they decided also to let this guy walk. They took breaks. Every once in a while the guy would just stop, and he never sat down. He said the whole time he'd never sit down. He'd just stop and say, let me catch my breath. And he'd get a sip of water, and then he'd just do that kind of look around like he was trying to get his bearing, but nothing seemed familiar. Now, I know you could have a bit of heat exhaustion coming out. Maybe it was his first trip ever in, and coming out looks different than going in. Maybe he was further along than he thought he was. Maybe he came in through Black Mesa. They could not get any information out of him. So they continued down. They got towards the area where the old parking lot was before First Water Ranch, down that area. And they were walking, and the guy was out in front of them, and they could see him. He was only 10, 12 feet away. And he'd stop. They would all pause. You okay? And they never got a name out of him. They'd ask him, things, and he just wouldn't reply, Do you need some more water? Are you hungry? And he'd sometimes delay and say like, no. And he's, I just not sure where I am. So they thought it was very, very odd. It was kind of disturbing to them, but they thought medical. They got up to that area where you kind of come around and go up, and then you're going to get ready to go down. And my friend, the not quite a Dutch hunter, but Dutch hunter, because he asked that I not use his name, said, we were standing there. I looked over, saw him standing there. He said there was about probably 20, 30 feet before you go down to hit the trail at the trail intersection, just before you drop down. He says, I'm looking at him, and I look over, and he says, I'm talking to the people. I look over, talk to the people. I look over, and he's not there. And he said, so I walked over that way thinking he'd went down the hill, but when I got there, I could see down the Second Water Trail to First Water Ranch, and I could see the trail the other way, and it's he was nowhere in sight. So we all kind of looked, and he said, we're looking off to the side and thinking maybe he sat down, but there's nothing there, vegetation or anything that would have done that. And he said, we spent probably 10 minutes trying to sort out where he would pop out. The couple went down and were worried he went towards First Water, even though they just couldn't figure out how he would have got there. He would have literally had to just take off at a sprint to get out of their sight that quick, and they would have probably heard something. And my friend went to the left towards the parking lot area. And then they kind of said, well, we'll come back and meet back here in 5 minutes. And they looked around again, saw nothing. They didn't know what to do. They didn't have a name. They had a basic description. And so they went up and they went to the parking lot, and one of the volunteer rangers was there. And they talked to him and said, look, we ran into this guy. And the park ranger, basically the volunteer, said he probably got back to the parking lot, got in his vehicle, probably just took off for home. And he wasn't sure what to say. He said he didn't see him. There was no one he saw similar to that. He hadn't been sitting there that long. But he said most likely he got back to the parking lot and he's left. If you guys couldn't find him, I mean, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do. And we don't have anything more than that general vague description. He said, I'll write this down, keep an eye out. They waited for an hour or so, asking some people that came out, where did you come from, which was weird to people. But they kind of tried to explain it as like, we ran into this guy, we're kind of worried. And they talked to people coming through back from Garden Valley to see if anybody ran across him on the trail. Nobody had seen him. So we're talking about it, and he told me the story, and I said, that's kind of weird. And he said, yeah, it was just like he'd been dropped in, and he just couldn't get his bearings. Something was wrong, something had changed. He said it could have been medical, but I don't know. But he said, the reason I'm bringing this up is you have a backpack over there hanging in the corner. And I looked over, and I said, yeah. And he said, that's the kind of backpack he was wearing, that. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, he was wearing that, which is what made it odd, because he could have been dressed for any type of business. He said, I'm so used to seeing people in their more modern hiking gear, but what he was wearing wasn't really different than what a lot of people wear. People wear different things, but he said the pack kind of was different. And what it was an old brown canvas Boy Scouts of America pack. And he was looking at it, and he said, I remember it even had, the writing on it, the little symbol on the back flap. And he said, it's kind of like a haversack. He said, I'd not seen one of them, but it looked really similar to the one. He said, where did you get that? And I said, I got that. Someone else gave it to the family. I said, that's from the 60s. It could be from the 50s, but those things last forever. And that puzzled him more. He said, so I ran into a guy who had no idea where he was in the mountains, totally confused, and he could have come from any time, any place, but he was wearing a pack from the 50s or 60s possibly. And I said, it appears so. At least he had an attachment to it. Now I'm thinking in my head, it does seem odd. I haven't taken that pack up into the mountains probably since the 70s. It's more of just kind of an antique thing. And I'm thinking now maybe to clean it up and take it back in the mountains because it's so odd. But it is unusual because I don't think I've seen one of those old canvas packs, because they don't even have zippers on them. They just got tie downs on them and stuff. And it was kind of odd because they do stand out. I know there's still tons of them because they don't rot or go away. They just last forever. They were very durable. They're just heavy. They're clumpy. If it rains, they stink. It's just, and they don't hold much of a payload. But they do last. So there is a possibility this guy was out there, had a little heat exhaustion, had that pack, somehow escaped their notice and managed to get back to the parking lot and left, and there's nothing to it. But if you are in the mountains and you come across a gentleman in blue denim and old faded Levi's without a hat with what looks like a bit of a flat top, and he has one of these Boy Scout backpacks, grab a picture, because we'd all like to see, and maybe take a finger, poke him in the chest just to make sure he's real. Because we're not quite sure what this gentleman saw and what these people, but he said, I had people that came up and were there too. And they saw him too. So he says, I don't think it was a ghost, and I don't think it was, he said, I don't buy that stuff. He comes from a technical line of work. So he's very, very methodic, very analytical. I've never heard the man mention the Jesuits, the stone maps, some heart stones, priests, and this and that. None of that stuff. He's very, very focused. And he said it was very confusing because he said it probably has a reasonable explanation, but he says it kind of defies it. And he said, the odds of me coming over and to pick this up and you just happen to be cleaning stuff out and have that hanging is kind of mind-blowing to me, because he said, I had never seen one in my life. And he just said to see one hanging up there made me think, what were the odds? Oh, what were the odds? And maybe you'll see me out this next fall, this winter, with that old Boy Scout backpack, because it would be kind of neat. Maybe, well, no, Trevor carries the camera bag, so he won't carry it. But pass it on another generation, because it was a generation before me, and we'll have to get it out no matter what. And check it out, see if everything's holding together good, and take it back in the mountains, let it revisit. Maybe I can run into the guy and we'll both have matching backpacks. That'd be kind of cool. So there you go, there's Chasing Legends for this week. Matching backpacks is a cool thing. And we will be continuing our journey to the rendezvous. If you have something of interest, because this is the 20th anniversary, this is a big deal. We want really focused things. We don't want to go out on the deep end areas, and I'm trying to connect people in various different types of things concerning the Superstition Mountains overall. But if you have something you want to do 20, 30 minutes, even 15 minutes, more than welcome to. We'll have a nice campfire and some stuff, and we like to have a few other things going on. I'm not going to give away the plans necessarily. I might put together something of a loose itinerary when we get in within probably 30 to 45 days out. But until then, I'm kind of reserving, trying to angle everybody together. My biggest problem is for a few people out there, and I don't do this to kind of screw it up for myself, but I tell them, hey, it's basically a non-profit type of thing. We don't charge anybody. Come out to the rendezvous, have a good time for 2-3 days. It's, you know, we have the guest speakers. There's just nothing. We provide some food for a meal, but it's kind of just to bring everybody in for kind of a celebration of the superstitions, the beginning of the next hiking season and so forth. And then they say, well, my billing fee is $500 an appearance. And I'm like, okay, am I supposed to bill you by the hour for speaking to me because I'm more famous than you? Which in some instances I am. But it's like, oh, come on. You can't make that one time for an hour or two, or come out, have a meal with people and do this and kind of like push that to the side. Because if that's your requirement, if you need that so badly, I don't know what to tell you. You're not sharing, and it's not in your heart of coming out and doing this stuff. So hopefully we get some really good people. I'm not going to press those people, but maybe during the rendezvous on Saturday night, maybe I'll have a list of some people and their fees that they wanted to charge to come out to speak to everybody. So we all put them on a back list of saying, yeah, these are the people that their heart's not in the mountains, their heart's more in their pocketbook. And hey, more power to them, but you know, you could give us an hour or two. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed Chasing Legends this week, October 25th, 26th, 27th, all right? And until then, you've got to remember this. It's the most important thing. Trevor always mouses it along with me because I always see it, but always remember the most important thing. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.